Rain lashed against the windows. Emily, soaked and shivering, unlocked the door to her new apartment. The old building smelled of dust and dampness. She dropped her bags, the only sound her own ragged breathing. The apartment was dark, lit only by occasional flashes of lightning. Emily flicked on the light switch. Nothing. Of course. The landlord had mentioned something about a faulty circuit. She would have to get candles, and food, and a lamp. The list seemed endless. Emily sighed. Moving in on a night like this had seemed like a bad idea, but the apartment, with its creaky floorboards and high ceilings, had called to her. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the dusty windows. Emily surveyed her new home. It was smaller than her last place, but it had character. In the corner stood a large, ornately framed mirror, its surface dulled with age. She hadn't noticed it the night before. It must have been hidden in the shadows. Curiosity drew her closer. The frame was intricately carved with twisting vines and strange, almost grotesque faces. Emily ran her fingers over the cool, smooth glass. A shiver ran down her spine. It was strangely cold to the touch. She decided to keep it. It added a certain charm to the place. That night, Emily lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the old building settling around her. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. She glanced at the mirror across the room. The moonlight caught its surface, making it gleam. And then she saw it. A flicker of movement, a shadow, just at the edge of her vision. Emily sat up, heart pounding. She stared at the mirror, but the shadow was gone. Had she imagined it? Probably. It had been a long day. She lay back down, pulling the covers up to her chin. The next night, the shadow returned. This time, there was no mistaking it. It was a tall, indistinct shape, darker than the shadows in the room. And it was closer. Emily lay frozen in bed, her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't tear her eyes from the mirror. Then she heard it. A whisper, soft and low, just at the edge of hearing. It seemed to come from the mirror itself. Emily's blood ran cold. She squeezed her eyes shut, pulling the blankets over her head. The whispers continued, growing louder, more insistent. Emily didn't sleep that night. Section 5. A Hand in the Mirror. The following nights were a blur of terror. The shadow grew bolder, its form more defined each night. It moved closer to the surface of the mirror, as if trying to break through. The whispers became voices, murmuring her name, beckoning her closer. One night, the mirror itself seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. The shadowy figure lunged forward, its hands, skeletal and pale, reaching out from the glass. Emily screamed, scrambling back from the mirror. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to do something. Section 6. Trapped. Panic surged through Emily. She grabbed the heavy velvet curtain from the window and threw it over the mirror, shrouding it in darkness. The whispers stopped. The hand vanished. Silence descended on the room, thick and heavy. Emily collapsed onto the floor, her chest heaving. She had never been so terrified in her life. What was that thing in the mirror, and how could she get rid of it? She couldn't live like this, constantly on edge, fearing the moment the sun went down. Section 7. The Antique Dealer's Tale. The next morning, Emily went straight to the library. She had to find out more about the mirror. Hours of research led her to a small, dusty antique shop on the edge of town. The owner, a frail old man with knowing eyes, listened intently to her story. When she finished, he sighed, his face etched with concern. "That mirror," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's cursed. It's said to hold the soul of a man trapped between this world and the next." Section 8. The Curse Revealed. Emily listened, her heart pounding as the old man explained the curse. The man, a sorcerer in life, had tried to cheat death. He had poured his life force into the mirror, hoping to live on forever. But something went wrong. His soul became trapped, twisted, and tormented. "And the shadow?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "That's him," the old man said. "He's trying to escape, to break free from his prison." Section 9. Released into the light. "But I covered the mirror," Emily said, a flicker of hope in her voice. "I covered it with a curtain. Isn't he trapped?" The old man shook his head sadly. "You have made a grave mistake, child. You see, the shadow feeds on fear. It draws strength from your terror. He looked at her, his eyes filled with pity. By covering the mirror, you have only made him stronger. Emily's blood ran cold. What do you mean? She whispered, her voice choked with fear. Section 10. Nowhere to hide. The old man leaned forward, his voice barely audible. You see, the shadow isn't bound to the mirror anymore. You have released him. His words hung in the air, heavy with dread. Emily's mind reeled. The shadow was free. But if it wasn't in the mirror, where was it? Section 11. Facing the shadow. Suddenly, Emily felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. She turned slowly, her eyes wide with terror. Standing in the center of the shop, no longer a shadow but a figure of darkness, was the sorcerer. He smiled, a cruel, triumphant grin spreading across his face. Finally, he hissed, his voice a low growl. Free at last. Emily was trapped, not in the mirror, but in the same world as the vengeful spirit she had accidentally unleashed.